Next today, blockchain has been heralded as the next big thing in tech. It is being deployed in sectors as diverse as finance, government, real estate, and healthcare. There are, however, as many challenges as there are opportunities. Here to explore those challenges and how to overcome them in conversation with Robert Hackett of Fortune are the CEO of Madeira Global, Christina Alfonso-Ercan, and the inventor of digital cash and the creator of the Elixir project, Dr. David Chaum.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? So good, we've got a nice little intimate crowd here. I'd like to level set and just kind of ask, how many people think that the hype around blockchain exceeds the potential? Raise your hand if you think the hype exceeds the potential. Got two non-believers in the back here. All right, well, let's get into it.
If we can turn that around, yeah.
David, what do you think? Does the hype exceed the potential?
No, I think that the potential is going to far outstrip the hype ultimately, because once you unleash the power of information technology to like everyone to create their own stuff and interact with every other thing, it's going to create a whole new digital world. It's hard to even foresee how far this will go and in what direction. So it's just a complete unleashing of the capabilities of human creativity, and yeah, I expect it'll be mark a profound change in the structure of society.
You've been involved in this from the very beginning. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, blockchain, everybody's excited about it right now, but really these technologies have existed for decades in some cases.
Yes.
And you were integral to creating some of the very foundations of this.
You know, it's a pity to have to say so, but my dissertation at Berkeley, I filed it in the library in 1982, and it had a complete specification for a blockchain. And that same year, I published a paper on numbers that are money, digital bearer instruments that received a lot of attention, and ultimately Deutsche Bank, which when it was the largest bank in Europe, issued e-cash based on, denominated in Deutschmarks, and then we had also U.S. dollars, Australian dollars, and a lot of major banks licensed around the world. So it was quite a big deal, but very, very early. There were no smartphones. The web was still very, very primitive.
And you said you had a specification for a blockchain. You didn't call it a blockchain, though. What was it called?
Chain of blocks.
It was called Chain of Blocks. There you go. So it's been around for quite a while. Christina, what about you? What do you think? Does the hype around blockchain exceed the potential?
I don't think anyone can really measure the potential just yet, so I agree. I had a chance on Monday to interview Tim Draper, and obviously he's a huge advocate of the space.
One of the biggest.
And I would agree with him that we have barely chipped away at the tip of the iceberg, but I'm also a skeptic at heart, and so I think that I'm also approaching it from a little bit of a different angle and also a much later vantage point than David. But I would say that I see it most disruptive to the financial services industry, which is where I operate. And then Tim was talking about some of the other industries that he thinks it'll impact. I think the last piece really is, I think there's a lot more chatter about the subject than there are people who truly understand it, and certainly much more than people who know how to execute on it.
You describe yourself as a little bit skeptical. What about it are you skeptical about? What specifically?
Well, I'm in the business of risk measurement, so so I think that based on the execution capability today, and also some of the security issues that we've seen, some of the security concerns, Tim had experienced, or he was part of the Mt. Gox. So I think a lot of people, David, you probably have some experiences that you could probably touch on.
Yes.
So that's really where the skepticism comes from. But it's more, I'm very interested to hear about the industries that we have yet to imagine. I'm separating blockchain from crypto here and saying blockchain certainly has a much longer runway.
And there's a popular meme that bankers have liked to say, which is blockchain, not Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Are you? Do you fall in that camp? Are you blockchain, not Bitcoin?
No, I'm a bit of both. But I just think that blockchain has far more of an application across multi-sector than Bitcoin, I also got caught up in the alts. Don't like to talk about that. So yeah, I would.
You invested in some alts?
Yes.
How did that go?
And Tim was saying, well, I wonder why it's been hovering around 6,500 for so long. And I said, well, because so many of us that got in so late at this point don't want to lock in the loss. So we're just figuring we might as well hang on and see what happens.
David, where do you stand on the whole blockchain, not Bitcoin phrase that bankers like to say?
Well, I think that one of the most interesting and exciting financial services investment products is really tokenization that allows the users of a community to own it and provides liquidity early on to the founders as opposed to later on. So I think that's really a unique thing and has a lot of potential for abuse, but also makes a lot of sense and opens up a lot of things in a different way. I think that what Bitcoin epitomizes is the use of these currencies as a store of value, as a kind of as opposed to, let's say, even as a payment system, and that's one thing I'm trying to change. So I wouldn't want to be tarred with the same brush as Bitcoin, but on the other hand, I think, of course, the ethos that Satoshi's white paper espoused is something that, was a 10-year anniversary just recently, right? It's something that we haven't yet even begun to see realized, because it was a very sort of everybody could run their own servers and participate on an equal footing in a new kind of financial system. That's not what Bitcoin turned out to be because of the ability to do this, build special chips for mining, which kind of changed it into something else. So
you mentioned Satoshi, and it was the 10-year anniversary very recently.
yes.
You don't happen to have any theories about who Satoshi might be, given that you're so immersed in the academic literature and technology? You're not Satoshi, right?
So, I'd rather
No comment?
thanks for asking.
Okay.
That's going to be all over Twitter.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, you heard it here first. Christina, you mentioned some of the different opportunities for blockchain in various industries. Maybe you could lay out some of those for us.
So the business that I started actually is in the impact measurement space. And 10 years ago, speaking to a lot of the global banks, they were very apprehensive about putting much capital to work in that area, mostly because they were still licking their wounds from the financial crisis. And so a lot of what I was preaching to them was kind of falling on deaf ears, about non-financial data really being a tool for client retention. If you can prove for every dollar invested what else the portfolio was doing beyond the financial return. I see a lot of that taking place right now with blockchain, in particular with crypto. So today you see Goldman Sachs having a crypto trading desk. You see, Jamie Dimon saying, "Oh, we'll never get into that," and "Oops, sorry, we actually already are." So I think that there's certainly this, we can't afford to not be seated at the table going on. But again, what their execution capability is right now, is still quite limited, and we'll see. But certainly, I'm seeing a very similar trend in the adoption. I think one thing that is 100% true about our human culture today is we are living in a world of convenience and of instant gratification. And so I think blockchain and crypto are offering us modern day conveniences that we are soon not going to be able to live without, and which will then make it easy to let go of the fiat as the security blanket.
You mentioned a lot of financial applications of blockchain, but where do you stand on other sort of applications outside of that field, like within identity or supply chains, various things like that?
I think David would probably elaborate more than I can. The ones that I've heard the most talk about is healthcare, identity, and insurance even. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, David.
Well, I think one thing that really informs this whole conversation for me is that many countries are, of course, naturally concerned that their consumer financial systems, products will be dominated by other countries. That's also putting them at technical risk for not only sort of gleaning intelligence and market advantage, but causing financial harm and disruption in case of hostilities. So the way I look at all this is that only through a blockchain-like structure are you able to create a secure enough, level enough playing field for all kinds of emerging countries to be happy enough to allow all kinds of sophisticated financial services and other key infrastructural service industries to come in and compete with, say, local providers without, creating this danger of kind of informational imperialism. So that's going to be extremely uplifting to all these emerging economies, because they can actually benefit from the best of all these sorts of services now without kind of the consequences of imperialism. So I think it's, even in developed countries, within a country, you have several major actors. The idea of infrastructure that none of them has a special position on is inherently advantageous and offers new options which simply weren't available before. And when it can do that at very low cost and reduce risk and systemic risk and all of this, I mean, these are the reasons there's really huge opportunity here.
Christina, you looked like you wanted to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I think, people talk a lot about the advantage being this democratization, right? That's something that people really seem to resonate with them, even in a limited understanding of what blockchain could be. But I think that right now we're testing in all of these industries the use case, but at the end of the day, it's business. And so I think one of the main reasons why banks were kind of holding off is, well, where's the revenue stream? And also they've made a very nice living for a very long time, and have met their quarterly return earnings, doing it the old-fashioned way. And so until they see reason or they are forced, I'm pretty active within the Milken Institute and sit on the New York chapter board. And over, I would say 5 years ago, even getting a panel at the annual conference on robo-advising was like, all the sponsors were kind of pushing that off. And over the course of the more recent years, it's been forced into the agenda because, it's kind of like they can't afford to not embrace it. So,
well, there's a whole spectrum of different environments where the dynamics are vary considerably. So you have over 1 billion unbanked individuals with smartphones in developing countries that have, I think in most cases, cryptocurrencies. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have, for example, Switzerland and certain canton trying to position itself as a hub for these sorts of activities.
The crypto valley.
The Swiss banks aren't really having any of it. So there's a whole range of possibilities within there, but I think it's not so much a question of can those banks that control a particular European country say, keep this out and maintain, keep on keeping on in their living the way they're accustomed to without having to worry about anything. It's more, where will these new technologies create real economic opportunity, not only for the citizens, but for the country in a balance of trade sense and development sense, and for the entrepreneurs and the smaller players who are all trying to do this. And you create global infrastructure and technology, you make it very easy for people to start doing business on a local, national basis. And if, as I have said, if you can do that in a way where the security level is really what we sometimes refer to as a national laboratory level, something that a nation state can be confident in, then that changes the whole game.
I'd like to talk about Elixir a little bit, unless, would you like to jump in
No,
there?
I just wanted to ask one question. How many people here own Bitcoin? What about alts?
Just a few.
The same folks. Mining. Anybody into mining? Okay. Even fewer. Okay.
How many people have a pet dog? Does this matter? No, sorry. I don't mean to be, no, well, whatever. What is who are you? Are you, you're members of the press, I assume?
No.
No, you're
press
other
is allowed in here.
speakers. Oh, okay. Well, great. Nice to meet you all. I mean, I hope this is interesting for you. It's a very exciting. It's unlike any other space I've been in, because the community members really do have, many of the key ones have a very deep belief in the common ethos. So it's really an amazing experience working in this field, and I've seen a lot of hype and booms and busts over the like the .com and so on. I lived through that, and I'm sensitive to all these kinds of aspects, but I don't think that's what's going on here. I think it's a very fundamentally different thing, and this represents really, it is to the web as the web was to the internet, if you will. I mean, this is the next logical step from of evolution of information technology, and creating this kind of infrastructure will dramatically change things. Instead of the internet just being a kind of a place that you can see a lot of stuff, it will be a secure community in which you can do all kinds of transactions, store things, secure things, create all kinds of new relationships, track things. It takes it to quite a different level, and it does this without any major actors having to do all the heavy lifting and then getting to own it. It kind of democratizes it and incentivizes it so that 1,000 flowers can bloom, and it lets every entrepreneur really take their best shot at it and move it forward.
I'll cut you off right there.
Yes.
You mentioned democratizing, and I find it very interesting. You mentioned you asking people whether they have it, and there are very few people that actually own some of this stuff. What are the hurdles to adoption? Christina, maybe you can lay some of these out.
Well, on a very macro level, I'm actually very intrigued by what's happening today globally, because you're seeing this trend towards nationalism, but at the same time, this is a technology that very much requires an adoption of sort of this international democratization. So I find it slightly contradictory, and I wonder how quickly people are going to get comfortable with that. Which is why I was asking the question, what are the reasons why folks here did choose? Is it just a FOMO thing? You just figured, let me just get in before it goes up too much? Or, because I think when when Tim talks about going to Starbucks 5 years from now and having them not accept fiat, I think, at one point I owned enough crypto to put a down payment on a house, now I probably have enough to set a travel budget that's nice for the year. You know, and that's unnerving, right? So, you know, I think you got to get people comfortable.
Well, may I ask you what attracted you to crypto? Because you said that you had bought some alts, maybe Bitcoin. I don't know what you were purchasing.
I'm on the board of First FRST, and they're a basically sort of a Bloomberg terminal for crypto trading. And so joining them simply because, as I said, there's a very common trend between the area that I work in and the area that these folks are sourcing capital today. And so it's through that exposure and just through you know, kind of being around the industry and seeing the way it's impacted the financial services sector that I, you know, kind of felt like you have to, as Tim was saying on Monday, you have to learn by doing. So you can read as much as you'd like about, I mean, I find it fascinating that in 1982 we had a vision for what this could be. I kind of want to know, David, where you think it will go. What's your vision,
well, you know, I hate
in
that.
2018?
Kind of be too, you know, brazenly commercial, but I would have to admit that the Elixir technology, which is now working in our lab and has received a lot of really warm reception from many key people in the field, I think is poised to take crypto out of the medium of, you know, investment and storage of, and make it be a global consumer payment system, integrating it with a global messaging system, which is like the proven low-hanging fruit. You see WeChat, all the major messaging platforms are desperately trying to add on a payment aspect. So this is a proven business model. This is what people really, consumers really want. And if you look at WeChat in China, for instance, they've integrated Uber and other things within it. So it's like the new platform. And when you look at Elixir, so we've got messaging with privacy way better than existing privacy messaging platforms, payments with no need for a merchant discount, and privacy as good as anything is out there, and we can make it a lot better if we wanted, and the ability to integrate dApps onto this mass consumer product. So it seems to be kind of the way to make blockchain be a global consumer product that has a sort of touch point for individuals on a daily basis and something they really care about. And once you've done that, then, and you've unleashed this easy to create dApp capability, then I think that's the beginning of when all this can really take off in sort of profoundly unpredictable new ways.
Without going too deeply into the technology, you know, we don't need to start talking about Merkle trees and things like that, but maybe you can give us a little bit of a description as to how Elixir works.
Sure.
How the technology is different from the state of the art today.
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of people in the field have been trying to do kind of make this a consumer product, get it out there and make it scale, and they've even convinced themselves that it's sort of impossible, and they were right, based on the kind of cryptography they were using. But a few years ago, I put an awful lot of effort into developing a breakthrough in cryptography, a fundamental breakthrough. I took something that was 35 years old, that I created initially. No one had found a way to speed it up, and I worked really hard on that after actually, truth be told, you know, I was kind of distressed when Snowden told us that the government was doing the full take, as he called it. And I thought, well, we need to solve that. So I found a way to speed this up by about a factor of 4,000, which makes it be now fast enough to use it as a consumer product. So that's what gives us the base level of privacy in payments necessary. Obviously, no consumer wants all the transaction details transparently on the blockchain. And it also gives us this new level of privacy and messaging, which, you know, better privacy and messaging was enough for people to switch in the past. So we expect that they'll be able, you know, it's integrated. So that was the fundamental breakthrough. There's a second breakthrough, which is that all blockchain payments today work by a digital signature authorizing a transfer from one account to another. So it's like a digital check. But the way eCash worked in the 90s was like digital coins and banknotes. It's like a containerization. You have fixed amounts. It's not just any amount from one account to another. You have coins or tokens. So that breaking the amounts of money up into these little building blocks gives a lot of advantage in terms of privacy, because all 1 cent blocks are kind of the same. And so that's the other technological breakthrough. We found a way to bring back the good part of eCash, but also much faster. So we don't use the cumbersome digital signatures that were used in those days. Now we have a way to do it that's also thousands of times faster per coin. So we can make these payments with privacy and send messages with privacy in the kind of 10 seconds from initiation to finality of, irrevocability of payment. That's visible to the counterparty. So that's what's needed.
So we're witnessing the resurrection of eCash.
Best of. We sort of extracted some of the key ideas and then layered on a speed up of this old thing, and when you mix those together in just the right way, yeah, it's WeChat with breakthrough privacy.
So we've got just a minute left. I'd like to ask you, Christina, where do you think this is all headed?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that a little bit differently. I think that, since the beginning of the year, my contact points within the VC world have shown that ICOs have been cooling off, and that VCs are actually preferring, they're excited about some of the technologies that they're seeing that are blockchain based, but they're preferring equity over the ICO, the tokenization. And so I think that tells us something. When I hear the store of value, again, the pragmatist, the skeptic in me has a reaction. And so I think, we've been talking about a potential market correction for quite some time, and whether that's this year, next year, or soon to come, I think that's where we're really going to test where people stand right now in terms of this adoption. So do I think blockchain has an unlimited potential in terms of the industries that it could disrupt? 100%. I think obviously Bitcoin will probably be the universal store for the time being, but yeah, that's how I would answer it, is to say, the upcoming correction will teach us where the adoption stands.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Thank you, everybody in the audience. I want David to connect with these two guys, get them on Elixir, maybe make them not so down on blockchain. But thanks.
Thanks,
Hey, it's great. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much.